So I'm going live here. You ready for this, Jesse?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. All right. It's still weird like when I go live, I'm not really sure actually when it's actually starting. I think it's starting now. So let's do this. All right, Jesse, let's have a conversation. Um
So all my favorite conversations start is let's have a
let's
conversation.
have a conversation. And
Bruno, we need to talk.
we need to talk,
We need to
Jesse.
have a talk.
We need to have
We
a
need to have a conversation.
we need to have a conversation tonight. Um
If we were dating, it would be a bad omen to
it
start
would
the
be a very bad
conversation off
omen.
as we need to have a conversation.
It would be a very bad sign. But in this case, since we're not dating, it's okay. So, Jesse, you were telling me before I started recording about some of your thoughts about conversations and about these podcasts. So I thought it was really interesting. But do you have so I yeah, in this channel I try to, or in this medium I try to I guess just have interesting conversations with people and explore some ideas that I feel that should be explored. In any case, that's the goal, that's the idea. But you're saying that you want to do something like that in the future as well. Is that something that is in your mind as well?
It's something that I grapple with and kind of wonder what media or medium is sort of the right one, for me. But I think that, similar to, I assume you drive behind, you know, live casting these conversations and philosophy club is to sort of share, a variety of different ideas and perspectives, and ideally, that would, cause a ripple toward, not just the people you're engaging on in your conversation, but the listeners, to elevate uh, discourse and just critical thinking about these issues, because I know you've talked about all sorts of kind of hot things about dystopia and like race relations and police and all sorts of
Sorry,
kind of
Jesse, my
politics and
I think the
and
connection got a
capitalism.
little bit bad here.
Oh,
Yeah, it's okay. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? It's just I think the connection was bad for a second here.
yeah. I was just saying, you tackle a lot of these kind of heavy topics. I mean, you do it
Yeah.
and you do it respectfully and in a nice and open forum, which I think that a lot of
Yeah.
people feel like that doesn't always seem that accessible to people in normal life. Um, so, I mean, for me, it's like I've had so many of these philosophical conversations and debates or discussions, depending on the context. And it's always stirring in my mind, but it's like, well, what's the point of it all if all we're doing is jacking off each other's philosophical egos. If you're not, I mean, when you're just having conversations, what are you doing to solve the problem? And in a sense, I feel like by having these avenues, publicly, that's a step towards, what, what can I do? It's just, my best hope
Yeah,
is
I
that.
think I think that's why, and this is, we talked a little bit about this before we start recording as well. But yeah, that's I was telling Jesse that that's why I'm really interested in this idea of recording conversations, of building an audience, building a community. on YouTube and Facebook and beyond, but just like connecting with people, but also like recording thoughts and broadcasting these thoughts, these conversations, these debates, because like you said, like this way, you're having somewhat of an impact in society. When you're just talking to a friend, I mean, it's not really going to go beyond that conversation between two people. But when you start having more organized discussions and several people join the community, then at that point, some sort of thing is happening, some sort of mechanism is starting to work and to put it to getting put into place. And I think with online, when you're doing it online, it and this is still, this is like, I haven't been very successful so far in growing this channel, so it's still a pretty small channel. But already, I have like some people from Russia and Serbia and North Carolina and beyond
Oh,
that
cool.
have seen our conversations and that have joined at some point. And hopefully other people have seen some of these conversations. It's a very small amount of people, but still, you're like touching people here and there, and you never know where it's gonna go. You never know where it's gonna go. But in any case, I like recording the conversations, because also it's a good way of you're basically you're doing like every conversation is a dialogue, but it's not in the written form, it's in the spoken form. And obviously some are better than others, but you know every once in a while, we have some good ideas. Or I mean, a lot of people have really good ideas that I like to listen to. And I'm hoping to listen to some good ideas from you tonight, Jesse.
Well, what kind of what ideas of mine are you interested in? What is it that
Well,
you'd like me to speak on from my experience?
well, I mean, I'm just interested in because you're saying like that you're always grappling with these ideas in your mind. So I want to hear about some of these ideas that you grapple with in your mind. Like one thing that we did that Huxley versus Orwell discussion last week, and that was actually you weren't able to participate because you're probably busy. Yeah, actually.
I had a play date with my son. Yeah.
Yeah, doing like important stuff, but I mean, maybe why did you decide to share that passage? Let me see if I can find the passage here. Oh man, I should have done this before.
Sure. I mean, it was kind of about the forecast of dystopian futures, and it was interesting that, geez, maybe 80, 100 years ago, Orwell and Huxley both sort of saw the writing on the wall and read it, a little bit. They read it a little bit differently, but I think I guess what I see is, okay, so the idea was that
I can, if you want, I can
did
read
you find it?
Yeah, I found it here. I can read the passage quickly. So so it goes like this. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture. In 1984, people are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World, they are controlled by inflicting pleasure. In short, Orwell feared that what we fear will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we desire will ruin us. And this is by Neil Postman. Um, yeah. So what drew your attention there?
I think that I think probably the accuracy of what I see as Huxley's prediction that we have at our fingertips virtually every piece of information regarding history, statistics, and all sorts of information, which people are less interested in. Nobody wants to research it. People don't want to read books. They want to click share memes because their friends are going to like it. It has less to do with a comprehensive knowledge or connection to fact or truth. And the studies that they've done with our dopamine receptors and social media prove that. I don't know how to mute my notifications without muting the whole thing.
It's okay. I'm not hearing anything.
Oh, good. Okay. So there's it's so, and that's sort of the pleasure that people are generally controlled with now. It's that the little dopamine rushes that everybody gets on their social media, essentially drives people much more viscerally than facts or history or truth.
Yeah, so we're kind of like in the discussion last Friday. We're trying to figure out who was right, Huxley or Orwell or both. So you're more like into the Huxley camp. You think that and in fact that was the purpose of the passage, right? He was trying to illustrate that our world resembles, at least in the West. Someone made the point that if you're in North Korea, maybe things look a little bit more Orwellian, or a lot more Orwellian than anything else. But let's say for us, or for the majority of the world, yeah, it seems that Huxley, at least it's an exaggeration, right? Like A Brave New World is an exaggeration of our reality, in a sense. Or, I mean, both.
Wow.
Well, all dystopias are trying to make a point. That's what. And also, in order to have a compelling story, you need to kind of like put on some steroids. Just like very reasonable stuff doesn't make up for like good science fiction, but it needs to be a little bit bombastic. But the point is, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I certainly I agree that not everybody saw it that way, but I certainly am in the Huxley camp, that even though both are true, I mean, we have elements, just the fact that we're always being watched. It's not by the government necessarily, but and we are largely surrendering the rights to our privacy. When you sign up for Facebook and you post all the pictures of your private life, nobody's like pointing a gun to your head, but you're doing that voluntarily. So it's a little bit more complicated actually than the 1984 Big Brother. This is kind of it's not forceful, and
Well, but we know the government is collecting all that information too. I mean,
yeah,
thanks to
as well,
Snowden.
yeah. But yeah.
But the thing is, it didn't upset people because they were like, well, I'm not a terrorist. Why would the government care about things that I do or say? And, they're not kicking in people. The NSA isn't kicking in people's doors because they're, texting their friends about, selling them an eighth of weed or anything like that. That's not happening. But, depending on the trajectory of the political climate, we could get to a point that, well, okay, if you want, to own a gun, you're going to have to submit to a background check that goes through all your social media information and make sure you haven't said anything that, we deem risky. Or, oh, you want to, get, apply for healthcare or a grant or something like that. Well, we're going to go through and see how you measure up. And I think that China is a great example of kind of the A/B testing, because it seems like they took power with a very Orwellian method, the current a communist government of China. But at the same time, they're growing they're growing their middle class. They're bringing more wealth to the population, and they've instituted this social credit system. Because even you'll probably learn this reading parenting books, like positive reinforcement is actually, or if you've ever been in management or anything like that, you learn like positive reinforcement is actually much more effective than negative reinforcement for most people. And I think that's the Huxley thing. It's like, all right, you're not going to toe the party line. Okay, we're not going to throw you in the gulag, but we're going to take away your right to buy a train ticket and to travel and to send your kids to school.
Yeah, it's the carrot and the stick, right? It's a combination of both. It works better than just one of them.
Yeah, you gotta have both.
Yeah. No, that's true. And Huxley and Orwell are sort of both, right? But in those books, you just have one thing because they're trying to make a point of a certain society, of a certain system. But if you combine both, then you have the carrot and the stick. Huxley is the carrot, Orwell is the stick. And actually, in our society, we have both. We have, like I said, elements of Huxley. All the entertainment that we have at our disposal right now that can distract us from other pursuits. That's Huxley, certainly. It's pleasant. I don't know if you watch sports, but that's an example of you pursue that yourself, like if you watch sports because you like them, yes, but also that detracts from actually doing something with your life. I spent the afternoon today watching a football match and listening to the commentary afterwards, and it's really brings no value to my life, but I like football. So.
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think that there's a place in life for recreation, for sure. Especially sports, because it's like a real thing. It's like people doing stuff and like competing with their bodies and the physics against other individuals.
The problem today is that we have so much of that stuff, not just sports, but all other sorts of entertainment, that it's hard to not get distracted from everything else. And it's not even just entertainment, right? It's like so all the technology around us and everything. Everything is a distraction. But then we also have, like we're talking about Orwell, as we do all these things, Netflix is collecting data on you, Facebook is collecting data on you, YouTube is collecting data on you. And in fact, we're, posting videos to YouTube.
That's the thing, the technology.
It doesn't really matter because everything is collecting data on you anyway. So like the people that are concerned that they're going to be on YouTube, you're already on Facebook, you're already on all these social media platforms. It doesn't really matter anymore, because they already have the data that they need. But anyways, so it's a, and like you said, I agree with you. And this is just the beginning. We're in 2021. Social media and technology, really the way we have it now with devices, hasn't really started until 2000 at the earliest. Really, it only started full for most people around 2010. So we're like 10 years into this thing, that the age of social media doesn't really start until 2010. I think
Facebook, the iPhone came out.
Yeah, and I think Facebook. When did Facebook started? It was probably not that.
So Facebook started in like 2006 or 2007. But remember, when Facebook first started, it started at only specific colleges, and then it went to all colleges. When Facebook first started, you could not open a Facebook account if you did not have an email that ended .edu. It was initially for college kids.
Look, in earnest, it only started about 10 years ago. 10 years ago is like when you started getting like everybody, also your parents, your grandparents, into the thing. Like society at large started like 10 years ago. But even if it's 15 years is nothing, man. YouTube started in 2006. In 15 years, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all these things, I mean, they conquer the world, you know, and iPhones, 15 years. Imagine 50 years from now, what this is going to look like if they did this in 15 years. I mean,
Well, I mean, it's
it's
scary. Like I remember when, you know, my dad brought home a computer and set up the modem and told us about the internet, and like in like 1995, and it was like, whoa, there's all this stuff on here and there's chat rooms, but it
yeah,
was just, it was the Wild West. There was no regulation ever. Like, yeah, of course there were big companies that were on there, but the big companies were, you know, on there figuring things out. Like there wasn't like AOL didn't control everything on the internet, virtually everything on the internet. And now we've gotten to the point that, like, you know, between Facebook and Google and Twitter, and Amazon, you know, they can basically disappear people. They can disappear ideas and stories, and if you don't go out of your way to look for it, you're not going to find it. But at the same time, that's individuals' choices to plug in to that convenience, you know.
we're yeah, we have like two parallel lives now, you know. You have your life and then you have your virtual life, but they both are very much connected, you know. It's not we're not even in the phase that one does not affect the other anymore. Right now, your virtual life is just as important as your personal life, almost.
They want you. That's the thing. That's that distraction you're talking about. Like for a, I think a human that was born in what, like 85, you're like the same age as me, right?
Yeah.
Like you still view like this duality, and that, like, okay, you have real life, and then there's like online life. And yes, online life is important. It's important. It's becoming more important. It's all integrated, but there is a division, you know. And for you, it's like, oh man, I'm being distracted. I'm not getting any exercise right now. Because I'm scrolling on my phone. Well, like that's not by accident. Like that, as far as, you know, Facebook and Google are concerned, like that should be your full-time. That's their full-time job, and their full-time job is to make it your full-time job. So when you're put your phone down and walk outside, you know, or go camping for a couple of days and don't even turn it on, like that's to them, that's the distraction. And they have
True.
the smartest, richest, most powerful computers working on trying to stop you from putting your phone down, you know. So
That is true. From their perspective, yeah, the distraction is actually doing something that is not looking into my computer or my phone.
and children who were born into it, you know, differently than us, like, because we were like, oh, we're 10 years old, you know, apparently there's just this thing that you can do on the computer, it's called the internet. Yeah. Like, but like your kid, my kid, like this is just the reality.
Yeah, that's one of the most concerning things, because and this is something we touched on last Friday, but it's really concerning that yeah, like, well, what you just said, you know, it's we have, I mean, we're old enough that we have a very clear understanding that this is not something that always existed. I mean, we grew up in a different situation, so we understand that this is a different thing that is very new, that is not really normal. But kids are not, they're simply not going to have the tools to understand, you know, like even if you tell them, they're probably not going to fully grasp it.
Well, the really scary problem is when it comes to, I think, development. And I think that, you know, they talk about like, you know, the crisis of, you know, sort of young men in our culture. And, you know, women have higher rates of self-harm and depression, attempted suicide. And like Jonathan Haidt pointed out, like the correlation between the generation that grew up on social media in middle school and high school compared to the previous generation like us that we got on it in like college, and how their rates of suicide and self-harm is just skyrocketed, and nobody's talking about it.
Well, I
And
mean, it's not surprising. I mean, it's really not surprising because it's a natural consequence of it. Because you're looking at yourself in a way that it's not natural for you to look at yourself. Because you're constantly like having to look at yourself, like at your face, your body, your voice, reviewing your thoughts, your past pictures, your past experiences, and this level of um,
self-scrutiny, or
yeah, self scrutiny or
lack of
observation. It's
privacy.
not natural for you to observe yourself in that way. It's natural for you to observe the world. The brain is probably not prepared for it.
Especially when you're constantly inundated with pictures of other people, of your
And that's
classmates
exactly,
and
yeah.
the other kids, and
I
they
was
all
gonna
look,
say that the
yeah.
other half is that also you're looking at the other people and constantly comparing yourself to them, and also the other people are constantly commenting on your stuff. So there's at least like three elements there that is not normal. That nothing of that is that I just said is normal. Some
And
things like people talking about you, that's normal, but social media is much more intense because it's constant.
and
uh
here's another thing.
that's
Like
not
if you're
normal. I mean,
when
that's what
you're
used to
at a
happen.
party, you're right, you're in a say in some social setting, and somebody some kind of frenemy or somebody, maybe they're drunk, and they make a snide, mean, cutting comment to you, and they embarrass you, and now it's like, fuck, and I can't believe they said it. Now you go home and you think about it over and over, but it exists really only as long as you keep remembering. Whereas now, if everything is happening online, it is absolutely like it's there forever. And then
True.
your
And what
peers,
if someone
they
shares it
can
as
throw
well,
that
right?
in your face because everybody loves to watch other people's drama. It's harder to be like, remember when he said this? Remember when he said that? That can only go on for so long. But when you screenshot it and bring it up and look at this, it just creates an extra permanent rift, between people, and psychologically, I think.
True. Yeah. And also people share it, which, in a party that wouldn't happen, like a couple of people would have heard it and that was probably it. Like something that would be shared by several people usually had to be something pretty big. But now, any little thing can be shared, and if people take a liking to this particular comment, I mean, maybe this comment will be seen by 40 people in your school, and whereas before it would be a couple people. So things become magnified.
And that's and I think that sort of, so the social structure in that sense, like the data, like in terms of severity, affects women, seems to affect young women worse. But I was thinking about,
It probably affects men as well, but yeah, women worse because probably they're more self-conscious, but I'm sure it affects everybody because
yeah,
it's human.
um,
Like, and it's such a big thing. Like, it's such an aggressive situation for young people, because they're not even as well equipped as we older people are. Like, not that we're particularly well equipped to deal with criticism on that level, but I mean, especially if you're 12, and you're pretty uncertain about many things, it's even harder.
so one of my books of light reading is William Sargent's The Battle for the Mind. And he talks about the Pavlovian psychology, which really, even though Pavlov was a big critic of Soviet regime, he was such a valuable psychologist. Like they allowed him to do a lot of work into his do a lot of work, which I'm sure benefited their regime quite a bit. So he realized that the correlation, Pavlov and the dogs, and they drool and he rings them out.
I just know that about Pavlov. Yeah.
So they realized that if people are under heightened stress, they are more easily indoctrinated, they're more easily connected to a given stimulus. So, a dog that's kind of hungry is going to react to a bell less than a dog that's like really hungry. So, and to a certain, and think about how like the news is always negative, right? Like the more negative emotions, the more fear and stress that we can pervade, the more easily people can be convinced to buy something, watch something, believe something. And with just kind of the natural patterns of like social media, for example, like we're talking about, there's this incentive to keep everything as charged and vitriolic as possible, which is it's fascinating, but disturbing,
Yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated. Yeah, I mean yeah, I mean, and then you have like the algorithms and everything, that kind of like you keep getting the same content again and again, and it gets more radicalized, and the more time goes by and the more videos you watch, and the whole thing is kind of like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's nice to unplug once in a while. I went to Costa Rica like 5 months ago or so, or beginning of the year. God, and it was just like, I kind of, I answered emails here and there and stuff, but I was very, close to being unplugged. And it was really interesting just to be around like that kind of culture. And yeah, it's a lot of like woo-woo, yogi Westerners, finding themselves. But there's a certain, it was just like refreshing to be where everybody's so like kind of living in this moment that it's sort of, I never had any conversations with people about like politics or like what do you do for a living. And it's like here in the States, especially in Minnesota, it's like so centric to like the beginning of everything.
What
it's
is
interesting.
A conversation about politics, you mean?
A little bit, yeah. And I mean, I noticed that just in my job, sometimes when I'm talking to certain people that I can tell have a inclination one way or another, mm-hmm. and they'll sort of like drop these little like kind of like trolly comments where you can tell they're kind of fishing and they want to see like what side are you on, or how are you going to react, what are you going to say? And it's just kind of
yeah, I mean, I can see that. I don't know if it's just in Minnesota. It's certainly in Minnesota. But I think it's probably all over the country. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's all over the country, but certainly in Minnesota, yeah. I mean, we've become very radicalized as, in this society right now because of all all the events that happen, with politics and all that. I think, um, and it kind of culminated with the 2020 election, but also in Minnesota, not really in Minnesota, because we've had all of the George Floyd stuff going on as well. So I think, in the sense, it hasn't even culminated yet on anything. Maybe with the trial of the cop. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know though. I don't even know if it's over. I mean, did they give him the sentence?
He just but he just filed for basically a motion to call it a mistrial because of all the fucking craziness surrounding. He's like he's filing an appeal to have the trial basically overturned, saying that it was impossible for him to get a fair trial.
Did he get sentenced?
I mean, he has a pretty good legal argument for that, considering they poured pig's blood on one of the witnesses' houses. I mean, it's
really,
it's been a fucking crazy. Oh yeah, one of the witnesses for the defense during the trial had his house vandalized, and they sprayed I think they left a severed pig's head on his doorstep and wrote in blood and stuff on it.
Wow.
So and that was news, So I mean, if you were a juror or any kind of witness that had to go home to Minneapolis, I mean, there's not a whole lot of there's one way you can go on that jury. I mean, which probably was the right way to go, but because of the circus around it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment on that because I don't have enough information, but did he get sentenced at all?
No, I don't know. I don't know if the sentencing happened.
Well, I mean, that would be the next step. I imagine that would have happened by now, but I guess not, because that would have been major news. But what I was saying is that in Minnesota, on top of the election, we had this ongoing saga since last year. So I think that was until that gets resolved somehow. Yeah, maybe this won't end, this radicalization and polarization.
And do you really think that it's an accident? Do you really think that it's these events happen to happen here and therefore they're going to be resolved? It's not. I don't see it as as a thing that could possibly be resolved. I think that if it wasn't, the George Floyd or the trial, it would be something, because there's such an industry in this movement, and there's so much to be gained by promoting just an attitude of destruction, and we need to tear the system down and turn everything upside down. I think that movement, that movement started way before George Floyd. I mean, been.
Do you mean the Black Lives Matter movement, or what?
I mean, just the
or the woke movement,
the Marxist call for tearing down the system and undoing everything. I mean, these are just
yeah. Well, there are certainly two very radical positions that seem to be at odds with each other, and none of those two positions are particularly intelligent or reasonable. They're pretty extreme and unreasonable. I mean, in many ways. So, but I don't know if this 2020 election like now that at least is behind us, I don't know if we'll see a little bit of more of a normalization of discourse, or not. I mean, I think I don't know. I was hoping, or I was expecting that to happen, and it has happened to some extent in terms of the. I think people dialed it down a little bit, uh, but it's still there's still a lot of radicalization and polarization, and it feels like anything can ignite the flame at any point. So I don't really know how we're gonna resolve this.
Well, maybe it's the chaos is part of the revolution, is part of the resolution. That
Yes.
there we're kind of at a point like the Ottoman Empire or the Roman Empire, where we're like can't can't reconcile with all these, just kind of the burden of wealth and choices, and people are, human beings have evolved for millions of years to be, hunter gatherers, and to be, agricultural, even their or agricultural farmers and that sort of thing. They're not, we haven't evolved as a species to, like wake up and watch TV all day, and then, mow our lawns, go to work, and not have something to passionately like fight against, and I don't mean just like warring against tribes, because that's totally a thing that, we've had to do for millions of years, or whether we had to or not, we did. But also just like warring against the elements. Like, how are we gonna, have food? Like the poorest people in, downtown Minneapolis are still like they're not starving because there's no food for them to have. Like, maybe they, they're sick and they can't get to a shelter or something, but like there isn't a lack of resources. Like, people are just stewing. And I think that part of the radicalization is almost natural, because people need something to feel like worthy for, like we're fighting for America, we're fighting for the oppressed. They have to feel like something in their life matters.
Maybe people need some sort of ideal to strive towards, and a lot of the times when we're talking about the masses, even like people that are fairly educated to some extent, and they're not stupid, but at the end of the day, if it comes down to like mass movements, it's usually things get pretty simplified, and you just get like fairly simple formula, so everybody can get sort of on the same page and follow the same ideas, and it's not something that really comes out of a situation of a discussion, or a real reflection about things. It's just it's almost like the lowest common denominator, right, on either side. It's just like, let's kind of figure out something that everybody can kind of follow, and more or less, it's simple. It's not complicated. Let's not complicate things too much. Let's just group things into a very simple category, so the masses of people can follow it. And
it doesn't even take it doesn't take the majority of people to follow things. That's something that I think it was William Sargent figured out when he was studying, like how Hitler took over and stuff like that. Like, you don't need 100% of the electorate to be behind you. You need, so 20% of people are extremely impressionable, and it was a hypnosis study. That's what it was. So 20% of people can be hypnotized very easily. Another 20% of people, it's like virtually impossible to hypnotize them. And the other 60%, they're, kind of in between. But they figured out, like, to make a massive movement in society, you only have to hypnotize. If you can hypnotize that 120%, like, that's pretty much, that'll be enough to sway the others, because everybody in the middle, they're generally have enough agreeableness to them. They're, if somebody's super passionate about something, even if you don't fully believe it, you're like, well, you seem to be really worked up about this. I don't really feel like don't feel like fighting, or I don't care that much. So, okay, I'll go along with it, and it goes along that way. And whoever controls the youth really controls the future. Because, you and I, like, what if Trump is president, if Biden's president, if we're living in a fascist dictatorship or a, communist, neo-communist oligarchy, either way, we gotta, like, keep our kid fed and, try to get them the best life possible, and make sure, our wives don't get mad at us like this. We have this primary instinct kind of at our age and our priorities. But fuck, man, when I was 15, if like a bunch of kids were going to burn down fucking buildings, I would be like, fuck yeah, let's do it. Like, that sounds awesome. Plus, it's like, you get a attaboy, it's for fucking the revolution. Like, that sounds amazing. Let's do it. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I'm fucking 35. I'm not going to go out and stop them. Like, don't come to my house. I'll defend it. But, like, I'm not going to go out of my way.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, and I mean, we've been seeing lots of mobs, of different sorts. And at the end of the day, yeah, it's the people that go into these mobs, are people that are willing to go out there and burn stuff and, follow some crazy idea, either one way or the other. But I mean, it's always a crazy idea.
I watched the Chauvin verdict, with my roommate here. And, came out all guilty. Then they go and they're interviewing people like, oh, are you happy about the verdict? And a lot of like the, really, hardcore, leftists or whatever, they're saying like, no, like, it doesn't matter. Like, this is bullshit. There shouldn't have even been a trial. And I'm like, wait, so what you're saying, like, I've heard so many people say there shouldn't have even been a trial. So this is bullshit. So you're saying that anything less than mob justice is a travesty of justice. Like, there should, like, everything should be, you have a side basically arguing we should have lynched, we should go back to lynching people, but only the people we say should be lynched.
Yeah, well, you can't really, let mobs decide anything, because mobs are very stupid.
But we've surrendered to the mobs. We surrendered the police station to the mob. We surrendered 38th in Chicago to the mob. Like, those aren't they're not elected officials that have gotten, permits to, commandeer private and public property. Like, they're a mob. And the city of Minneapolis has said, okay.
Yeah, I think they were doing what they thought was best. I think it was weird way to deal with things. And it probably didn't help much, but like, who knows, man? The Minneapolis City Council, they came out and said that they should get rid of the police. Like, well, I don't know, like, what these people are like even thinking, so if these were the people that were in charge, I don't know.
Dude, yeah, I don't know either. Like, it sounds like even criticizing it sounds absurd. It sounds absurd to criticize it, because it's like,
Well, it sounds
admitting
absurd. Like
how absurd things have gotten. Like,
regardless of your political orientation, if you're a reasonable person, like that's pretty absurd, you know. Um, so I don't know. Like I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, I know that at the end of the day, you know, the things got under control, so I can't really criticize the government in Minnesota all that much because yeah, they got it under control, but
oof,
it probably could have been better. Uh,
dude, it's I don't see it as under control. Like, there's so
well,
many
yeah,
more
true. It's not
gunshots than
bad under
ever.
control.
Like, there's
Yeah,
carjackings all the time. The people who live in that area like can't, like, yeah,
yeah,
anyway.
true. I mean, I live in a very peaceful area. Much thanks to you, because you helped me get the place. Um, but so I don't really see. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think, yeah, I think they should have done a much better job. I agree. And the fact that they came out and said that they should get rid of the police and that they're gonna get rid of the police when that's like pretty much an absurd idea. Yeah, I mean, makes me question, you know, like the people that are in charge. At least the mayor seems to be a little bit more like, at least he's a little bit more realistic about things, it seems. But I don't know, like if it seems that it took him a while to figure this out, that you know he needs to make the right decisions regardless of the what the mob is doing. It seems that he's doing it now. Maybe in the beginning he was just like too, you know, he's also a young guy. I mean, maybe he was
Yeah,
pressured into things. I'm not really sure.
I met him once.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, the Min roast right after he became mayor.
Oh, that's cool. How did you meet him?
So there's a local online Minnesota paper called the Min Post, MN Post, and it's pretty good. It's a very quality newspaper. It was started by the former editor of the Star Tribune, and every year they put on this like variety show downtown that kind of lampoons the local politicians, and the politicians are always there. And my ex-wife, some people that she was used to perform with, like her friend is like the director of the show. So there's all these like, you know, local, like this like local musical band and host. They do these, you know, little like fun sketches, and they kind of poke fun at themselves. And there's always like the governors there and the mayors are there and stuff like that. So and then afterwards there's a party at the bar next door. So I, you know,
So you just went up to him and talked a little bit.
yeah, I was probably kind of drunk. And, oh yeah, nice to meet you. I was born in Minneapolis. Welcome, you know. And he's just like the super cool, like bro. He's like, he kind of looks like James Franco. Like he's like it's like he was manufactured in like a lab for mayors, you know, and they like shipped him out. Like, okay, like
He's like the new edition, the new generation. You know, 'cause he's still pretty young, so they're trying out this new model.
yeah. And you know, it's like in good times it's great, but you know, when the shit hits the fan, like, did he, you know, show like leadership? And in my opinion, no,
No, in my opinion, he
failed.
did. He certainly did it in the beginning. Now it seems a little bit better.
True, and I
At least he
appreciate.
was better than the city council because he did say that, guys, this is kind of ridiculous what you're talking about here, and he was booed out of the meeting. Remember that? I don't know if you saw that in the on TV, but everybody's like booing the mayor and insulting him and going up to him and saying like stupid stuff to him and aggressive stuff, and he just like walked away, and that seemed, I mean, that was scary, man, because that was really like the mob in control of the city. And those were the days that you, like, I even went, we even left the city a couple of days, you know, because because we lived in South Minneapolis, you didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, the mob was out of control at night, and that was before the governor took charge, and he kind of like set things right. But
yeah, sending in the National Guard, and it's
yeah.
funny to watch. Like, I mean, I listen to all my friends. Oh my God, fucking fascists! I can't believe they sent in the National Guard. This is bullshit out there.
Well, they were burning the city, so
you're burning the fucking city down. Like, as far as like, you're fucking lucky. I mean, yeah, if we had a Republican governor, fucking him and like they wouldn't even like, this shit would have just been, they would have just wiped that fucking whole thing clean. Like, and I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I don't
necessarily,
know. But I
like,
do think that he did a very good job, the governor. So I was happy about that, especially because I lived in South Minneapolis. I was happy.
So you were still living there at the time?
Yeah, man. They were burning stuff, not so far away. So it was.
You were on like 38th and Grand, right?
Yeah. It was.
God, Victor's is like my favorite fucking cafe. I love Victor's so much.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody was kind of panicking. You walk the street. I mean, Beth got mugged. It was. Yeah, it was like Wild West, man.
It hasn't fucking changed much, dude. Like, no, I'm serious. Like, they're not like.
But those days were really bad. I mean, people were getting shot in Uptown. It was the police stopped going there. It was out of control, and these guys, the city council, were saying that, oh no, we should get rid of the police altogether. It's like, dude, can you see why it's happening on the streets?
Unlike places, unlike like New York or Baltimore, like different certain big cities, Minneapolis, the way the government of Minneapolis is set up is that the city council has a lot of power. They actually have more power than the mayor. The mayor is sort of a figurehead. Like, the mayor can't do really anything policy or legislative wise, very little, without the city council's approval. So it's very it's just such a weird situation.
It was certainly a weird situation, and I hope they get these things under control. But not that there aren't there are many problems that should be solved, and hopefully we can take the best ideas that come out of this and implement them, and make the best out of a bad situation. But
well, okay, you're not originally from Minnesota, right, Bruno?
No, from Lisbon, from Portugal.
From Portugal, okay. I knew that. I was just
wanted to inform the viewers.
To inform the viewers, yes. Now, I'm quite ignorant in my modern history of Portugal, but I'm curious. Was Portugal affected by the Spanish Civil War, by like the reign of Franco and like the fascists and the communists? Like, what was like, I'm curious what like Portugal's history was when all of that happened.
No, it was no, not really. What happened was that there was it wasn't affected by the Spanish Civil War, but Portugal was affected by the political momentum of the time. So it was affected in that way. It wasn't a part of the war itself because it was a different country. And the Spanish Civil War is just in Spain. It didn't really cross over into Portugal or France. But Portugal, I think it was, I'm trying to think if it was before or after the Civil War, before Franco. Portugal got itself a dictator as well. So
okay.
In the same way, in the same vein. So in a way, the Spanish Civil War did have an important impact, but it just in Portugal's case, it was kind of like a peaceful transition. The dictator, there wasn't really a war that ushered the end of the republic, and the beginning of the dictatorship. I mean, maybe it wasn't like 100% peaceful, but there was no civil war or anything like what happened in Spain, not even close. It was basically it was Salazar, and like Harry Potter, Salazar Slytherin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. He's named after him, after the dictator in Portugal, because J.K. Rowling actually she lived in Portugal for several years, and
God, I never knew this. This is awesome. I'm very excited.
yeah,
Okay.
and she named Salazar Slytherin after the Portuguese dictator. And
So he was he kind of. I mean, I assume he was his own version of fascist.
he was fascist, but it wasn't just Portugal, right? It was Portugal, Spain, Italy. All three countries had fascist governments, and those were like the main fascist governments. Italy was the original, and then you had Spain, which was pretty high profile because of the war. Portugal was also
They
fascist
tried
government.
in France, but it didn't really.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a puppet regime, and then the Nazis were a little bit different. It was the fascist, but it was also, they had other stuff
It
into
was the
it.
Hitler twist on fascism.
Yes,
Yeah.
National Socialism, which was like fascism, but even, like 10 times more aggressive. Um, but the Portuguese version was actually probably the milder version, but it was still fascism. But
Yeah.
it was a milder. If Hitler was a lot more aggressive, the Portuguese version was a little bit more.
Well, a lot of people don't realize too. Like, I mean, I was surprised when I learned, like, wait, Spain was fascist until like 1970. Like, because America likes to think, oh, we went to war and like, yeah, Mussolini and Hitler
And,
were the
and, and
fascists, and then we defeated them,
curiously
and then it
enough,
was over.
and
But it's
curiously
like,
enough, that Spain had a peaceful transition, and and kind of like there was no real event, there was no revolution that led them from fascism to democracy. It was a gradual thing because Franco died.
yeah, and by the time
Portugal was the
Franco
opposite.
died, it's not like there were communist insurgents in the streets,
No,
like when he took over.
what happened is that nobody really wanted Franco anymore, so when he died, it was sort of like it made sense. Also, a big reason why they transitioned into democracy was because the heir to Franco was the king, because Franco wanted the monarchy. He didn't really want like a personal heir to take place. He to take control of Spain. He wanted the monarchy to be restored, and that was like his instruction. And the king didn't want to be a fascist ruler, basically.
Yeah, so he's like, okay, I will give it back to the Republic.
Yeah, well, not the Republic, but let's model it after the sort of like the British model of, we still have the monarchy, but it's a constitutional monarchy. It's a democratic monarchy, which is kind of like a contradiction in itself, but I guess it works. The British showed everybody that, you can do it. So the Spaniards are like, well, let's do that instead. It's nicer than the fascism thing, and I'm not really interested in that. I want people to be to do their thing, because people really wanted, because Spain is part of Western Europe. At that point, Spain and Portugal were the strange cases, that were still under this fascist regime in the 80s, the 70s, and everybody else was like, "What are you doing, man? This is like, we're done with this in the 40s. So like, you're still, doing this thing." It didn't really make much sense. So it was just a natural transition. But in Portugal, there was actually a revolution, because the fascist government in Portugal wasn't quite, like they did want to stay in power.
What year was that? When did
It
Salazar
was
die?
it was 74 or 75. I think it was 74, something like that. Mid 70s. I think it was 74, and the army just took over, and the army was like, okay, he's done, like, and there was a successor, a fascist successor. um Actually, some people in my family knew him and were friends with him, and at some point, but he was even nicer than Salazar, or like milder than like he it was kind of like in Portugal, it was not a very aggressive thing, and certainly at that point it was the 70s. Like I said, everybody, in Western Europe was a democratic system. um but still, I mean, it took the army to, you know let's end this. Let's it's been long enough, and everybody else just moved on. So let's join the rest of Europe. And but nobody really died. I think maybe two people died because the army just took over, and there was nobody really to fight them. I mean, it was basically it was a left wing portion of the army that said, enough is enough. And they were even thinking maybe turning Portugal into sort of like a socialist country. This was still the Cold War era.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there was really no support for that, except for some people in the army that took over. So it was never really going to work because they didn't really have the support. So it was
So
just,
did they
okay,
become a constitutional monarch too?
yeah, well, no, it was a republic because Portugal didn't really have such a strong tradition with the monarchy anymore, like Spain. Because Franco really, like, he wanted the monarchy. He was like really pushing for the monarchy to be restored, and
Yeah. I mean, it's like the essence of like fascism in its most extreme conservatism is like Hitler is like, he even called them like, we're the Reich, we're like the next Roman reign, we're
yeah,
like the new, like
yeah. But
the idea that we need to restore
the
our
funny thing is that
nationalism to its like royalty.
the funny thing is that in Portugal, people are the dictator in Portugal is really unconcerned about these things.
Yeah.
He couldn't care less. Like, what he really wanted was for things to be orderly. He was the minister of finance. That was really his thing. He wanted everything had to be orderly. This was his version of fascism. It was a lot more chill than I'm not saying like it wasn't fascism, because it certainly was. There was like secret police and all that, but you can't really compare it to like the fascism in Germany, or
Yeah.
even Italy. I mean, or even Spain. Really, I mean, you can't really compare it to that. It was dialed down. And actually, interestingly enough, because like
I would expect only the most chillest version of fascism from a country that legalized heroin.
yeah, yeah, Portugal tends to be like yeah, if things hit, people want things to be kind of chill, not too aggressive or violent. But at the time, another thing that in Portugal, so part of the fascism thing, why the army wanted the whole thing to be over, is that Portugal was actually the last colonial empire to fall. And that was largely because there was still a fascist government in place. And part of the sort of like the allure of the moral authority of the government came from the fact that they were keeping the empire together. There
Yeah.
was still a
And you
colonial
guys, and they're
empire.
all Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the decree? And I don't remember the year where basically the Pope was like, all right, we're going to divide the world, like everything west of the Atlantic, Spain gets to have, and everything east of the Atlantic, Portugal can have. And it's like,
Yeah.
you guys just like controlled all the shipping routes
Yeah.
from
It was
fucking Lisbon
yeah, it was
the
the
east.
Tordesillas treaty, and it was basically, yeah, let's give most of the world to Spain and a little bit to Portugal, and everybody else go fuck yourself. So, I don't know how like the Pope thought that was ever gonna hold, but yeah, that's what they decided. Spain had a lot of power back then, and Portugal had a little bit, but Spain had a lot of power.
Well,
Um,
Spain had all the might, but it seemed like the way it was taught to me, it was that like Portugal had the know-how. They knew how to, they knew their shipping lanes like
well, Portugal was a lot.
throughout like the Horn of Africa, like
Yeah,
really, really
Portugal
well.
was actually more. Well, it was a lot smaller than Spain, but the thing is, most of the Portugal's role in the whole discovery period of history is a little bit underlooked. Portugal is really responsible for most of it. Most of the world, and these days you can't say discovered, but really from an European perspective, it was
Yeah.
discovered because they didn't know it was there. And most of that stuff was actually done by the Portuguese. They were like, in most places they were the first. Like the biggest exception, like really like of really note was the Spanish did get to the Americas a little bit earlier. Columbus, even though he wasn't Spanish, he was Italian, but he was working for the Spaniards. And
Yeah.
in fact, this is like actually illustrates my point. He was gonna go. That trip was supposed to happen for Portugal, but it fell through. Like I think they didn't give him the money or something like that. But he was supposed to be like he was gonna go. He was gonna captain like a Portuguese expedition, and at that time they didn't know that he was gonna discover the Americas.
No,
Obviously,
they thought he was just going to find a new way to India.
yeah. Well, that was the intention, and the Portuguese actually did that. That was the which was like the main thing, because obviously India at the time for them was the land of riches. You could go and get all these things that were like super expensive in Europe. So they thought that was like the best thing that they could possibly get. And it was a big thing. And the Portuguese did discover that path first. But obviously the Americas afterwards, you had a lot of gold, silver. So that made the Spanish really powerful.
And the English took it.
Yeah, but also, if you look at the history, actually the English, um really the British Empire doesn't become the most important empire in the world until really the 19th century. Before that, there were other powers in Europe. Spain was certainly the biggest power in Europe for many, many centuries, and France also, so between Spain and France, they were usually the big dog.
Yeah.
England really became the biggest one after Napoleon lost, and then that was really
And
the
well, in
turning
the
moment.
Spanish Armada, sinking the Spanish Armada.
Yeah, and the English had some. Yeah, they were kind of powerful, but the Spanish and the French were usually the top power, the most powerful country in Europe for most of like that modern history, until really the British become the superpower after Napoleon um, gets defeated. And obviously today the United States is a superpower, but we think of the United States as a superpower, and rightfully so. But that only happened in the 20th century. Before that, especially
And only the second half of the 20th century.
Yeah, only
they were
before
World War II, even like in World War One, like they didn't get into World War One until the very, very end.
Well, yeah, exactly. So we're a little bit biased because we think if our perspective is kind of the perspective of our time, but really, if you look at history, like more of a historical perspective, Voltaire, I think it was Voltaire. This was like the end of the 1700s. They were still completely unconcerned about France losing their North American possessions, because to them it was like, he called it like some snow. They were losing some snow for them.
Yeah, some snow in Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were really, or they really weren't concerned about these things. Really, the Americas came into play, or at least North America came into play really in the 20th century, really as a major power. Before that, I mean, it was much more relevant. The Caribbean, all the Spanish territories.
Well, it's were all like the
full
juicy
of gold,
wealth,
silver. Yeah. So that was actually more important for Europeans. And then you had the British colonies, which were really not really that important. And it was sort of like a leftover, honestly. I mean, that was exactly what it was. Spain, in fact, the Pope gave, something to Spain, a little bit to Portugal, and then the leftover was was basically North America, because they weren't interested in it. Spain wasn't interested. It didn't have anything that to them seemed valuable. What they were looking for was like wealth. And
it was like the Mayan,
America.
No, the Aztecs. The Aztecs had all the
the
wealth
Aztecs,
and the gold, and
the Incas.
I can't remember who it was.
In the Caribbean, they planted a lot of sugar, like stuff that was really good for the economy in Europe, that they could sell very expensively. So the thing with North America, it became it's the center of the world these days, but back then, as in the mentality of colonizers, and they were setting up these colonies. It was really, there wasn't much there, that they could actually exploit, and Spain wasn't like, they didn't really want it, to be honest. That was the thing, and then that's why the French and the English, because they got into the game later. They got into, so that was the only thing left, and the Dutch as well. And the Dutch really,
They really went after Africa.
yeah, they got very little, so it was sort of like what's still available now, and yeah, I mean, it was like the colonial times was, yeah, all these European powers just trying to grab as much as they could, and whatever was available. And that's why, if you look at Africa, for example, the English and the French got most of it, because at that time they were already more powerful than Spain. They were a lot more powerful than Spain at that point, because that was more like end of 18th century, but mostly 19th century and beginning of even 20th century, and that the balance of power had shifted at that point, right? So,
And
if you look at Africa, it's a very different picture.
If you look at the kind of mercantile colonial history too, from the Ottoman perspective, it's kind of interesting, because it's like you had, when Spain and France and Portugal were the big players, it's like they were fucking with the Ottomans a lot. And then when like England came in, they came in and they were like, oh, don't worry, we're going to give you a better deal than the Europeans. And from an economic point of view, England had the ability to basically trade anything to the Ottoman territories, and the Ottomans were wealthy as fuck. So they were like, yeah, we want like wool coats and cool toys and tobacco, which came from the Americas, like, Turkish tobacco. Like, nobody's growing tobacco in Turkey, but a Camel cigarettes still have a picture of a pyramid, which isn't in Turkey, and it's all Turkish cigarettes because it was fashionable.
It's crazy.
And then England wouldn't let anybody sell anything in England. So all England did was collect piles and piles of gold while they dealt stuff to the Ottomans, and they're like, hey, we don't care about gold, we want cool stuff. And then they start fucking over the Ottomans with, get one sultan drunk and be like, oh, now we own all the rights to, this and that. So then Germany started coming up. They were even later than England. And they came into the Ottomans. They were like, oh, fuck England. We're going to hook you up. We'll build your railroads. And that,
it's interesting. History is fascinating. We kind of went from philosophy to history, but it's
they're tied together. They're always tied together.
Yeah, they're and also, but I said I'm from Portugal, but also I'm sort of like half Portuguese, half Brazilian as well, and I have family in Brazil. And I was actually born there, even though I moved to Portugal with my family very, very early on. So I didn't actually spend a lot of time living in Brazil when I was a kid. But
you should go to Brazil, man.
It's cool, man. It's a cool country. It's kind of chaotic. My family is in Rio, most of it, which is
my dad lived in Rio for.
Oh, really?
When he was a kid, yeah.
Well, and the city has grown. I think when your dad lived there, it was probably cooler. I mean, now it's cool, but it's like so big. It kind of freaks me out. I went there to visit my grandparents a couple of years ago because my grandpa wasn't doing so well there, and it was, yeah, it's always a little bit chaotic, but it's also a very cool city, and there's amazing beaches and stuff like that, and mountains. It's beautiful in terms of like the nature. And
how old were you when you moved from Brazil to Portugal?
I must have been like 6 at the time, 5 or 6.
Oh shit! All right.
So
and then you moved from Portugal to the United States?
No, man. No, because I went to school in Spain and then England, I finished my degree in England, went to college in England. So, and then I lived in France for a while, even in Italy for a while. So I kind of like lived all over Europe. Um, After I left home, basically, I just kept, yeah. I mean, England was, I finished my degree there, but I also spent considerable time in Spain and France and a little bit of time in Italy. Um, and But I would say like my family in Brazil, I'm some of my ancestors, because you're asking me about Portugal, Brazil at the same time, because there's kind of like a connection between Brazil and Portugal at the
Yeah,
same.
totally. They're the big.
Yeah, because Brazil was a part of Portugal. Brazil actually became a dictatorship around the same time, also fascist dictatorship, but also kind of like a more peaceful sort. Um, and actually, I'm related. I'm related to to the dictator at the time, so it's a interesting bit of family history. Um,
Oh wow, that's
Yeah, like
amazing.
in my name, I actually have two surnames, two last names that are I'm named like dictators. Vargas, which was the dictator in Brazil, and Franco, like the dictator in Spain. So,
Wow.
but
Jeez, I
I'm
didn't
not related to
realize I was talking to fascist royalty.
Franco. No, but I'm not
Just
related to
kidding. I've always suspected.
Franco. I'm not related to Franco though. It would be cool. It would be cool.
Right.
Just to accumulate my dictators. No, but Vargas was the dictator in Brazil at the time, and he was dictator slash president, because he was also elected as president after he had like two stints in power. Um, he was like he dominated Brazilian politics for like 30 years or something like that. So Brazil was also a fascist country, and South America has had in the 20th century considerable uh, a lot of contact with fascism of different sorts, because
Yeah.
first you had that sort of fascism that was like the milder type, and then so to speak, I mean, obviously this is a lot more complicated than this, but then you had like really bad regimes that were like super aggressive in the 60s 70s, which was like the military dictatorships. And I'm sure you've heard of it.
Juntas.
Brazil's was like bad, but it wasn't like nearly as bad as Argentina and Chile,
Yeah.
Peru. And those dictatorships were mostly put in place by the CIA, by the United States, to control those countries. But they were like terrible. Like they treated people very, very terribly. Um,
But
yeah.
they got shit done.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
it's horrible. I've been
So,
drinking.
they didn't really. I mean, if you look at no, I mean,
I
they
mean,
got shit
Chile
done for the.
Chile is like a first world country in South America, isn't it?
Yeah, I like it's in recent times. Yeah, they've improved a lot. They've improved a lot, but they weren't for a long time. But now they're the most advanced economy in South America. But
Brazil too, isn't Brazil like a big like tech hots? Like right now, I know there's a huge disparity between like the poor and the wealthy and crime and stuff, but like don't
well,
they have like a big like technology sector?
yeah, well, Brazil is doing well for a while. Now it's a shit show.
Oh yeah,
It's been a shit show for a while now. Hopefully, he can get a little bit better.
well, hopefully. My so I was a double immigrant sort of. My
I mean,
childhood.
what am I? I mean, like I'm a serial immigrant. I've been an immigrant in so many different places.
You're beyond immigrant though, man.
I'm
Now
beyond
you're
immigrant.
just
I'm
you're a
really
citizen of the world.
well. I'm a nomad.
You're just like you're a nomadic. You're like a cosmopolitan, I believe. Like
I'm very nomadic. That's why like I don't really see things like a lot of people see things, because I've since I think that's big part of why, like my identity is really like I see myself as a human, part of humankind, because really nothing else really makes sense to me. So,
dude, I grew up I was born in Minneapolis, like at HCMC. And then when I was 5, I was an immigrant. We moved to Israel. And we're like, we're gonna move, this is where we're gonna live. Like, we're fucking Jewish, like super like Zionist. Like, we lived in a West Bank settlement. Well, first we lived in like a immigration absorption neighborhood with all the Soviet Union refugees and Ethiopian refugees. And then
wow.
and then we moved to a West Bank settlement outside of Jerusalem.
Wow.
Yeah. And we were there for four years. And we're building we lived in a trailer in the Judean desert. They throw rocks at our car and shit, like, and wow. We, drove to school.
That's hardcore, man.
And then I was 9 years old. My mom's like, yeah, we're going to go on a vacation to America, and we get there and it was like Apple Valley, Minnesota, and like, she's like, all right, well, I'm divorcing your father. We're not going back to Israel.
Oh, boy.
Go to school, pretend to be normal,
So it wasn't a vacation. It wasn't
a vacation. The vacation's still going on, yeah.
Wow. It's still going on.
27-year vacation.
That's a long vacation, yeah.
It wasn't much of a vacation either.
So I didn't know that you moved to Apple Valley. It's funny.
My grandpa like built a house in like old Apple Valley back in like the 60s or 70s, and he was like career Air Force. He was in all the big wars. I mean, and he was like ethnically Jewish, but he was like very like, he was not into that like at all, like very just kind of like, normal, American. Like, he was like Red Foreman from that 70s show. That was like my grandpa,
Sure.
Except he was a badass. He was like an Air Force major,
Wow.
So yeah, that's where so my mom just went back to Apple Valley, and
she wasn't digging the whole Israel in the desert thing.
Well, yes and no, she was not digging that, but more so it was because my dad was just, my dad is it was just kind of crazy. He, how they have the stereotype about Jews and their ability to make money. Not only is there the world stereotype that if you're fucking Jewish, you probably are really good with money. But in fucking Israel, if you're an American, everybody in the world thinks that, if you're fucking American, like anybody that doesn't live in America, they're like, oh, dude, if I was in America, I'd be a millionaire. Like, I totally know what I would do. And that's, everybody in the fucking world thinks that. Fucking Jews in Israel, it's like, you're American, you're a Jew and you're American. Yeah, you must fucking be really good with money. You must be rich, But we weren't. And he had like the bigger idea. Like, he was like religiously a little schizo, but also he might have actually been a prophet, because a lot of the shit he said is not coming true. So, who knows? But yeah, he wasn't like a good provider like that. He was like, God will provide for us. And it's like, well, God isn't gonna fucking like stop the bill collectors and like the mafia that's gonna come to collect. So we gotta get out of here.
Wow. Well, that's interesting.
So then I had to be like, I was an immigrant. I was like I was the American kid when I was growing up in Israel, which was cool. Like, it was cool to be American. But then coming back to Apple Valley, there's no fucking Jews, and I'm like all like hardcore Israeli. And they're like, who the fuck are you? Like,
and it's not
Tommy Hilfiger shirts. What are you wearing? And I'm like, I'll kick your ass. And they're like, oh my God, you swore. Like, very different culture shock. So then it's like, I'm like the weird Israeli kid, even though I'm from America. Yeah. I don't know how to write in English. I had to go to like the ESL classes, even though I was English second language classes, like with all the immigrant kids.
Yeah, I taught ESL for like a week actually.
Yeah, man, it's a fucking trip, And
Okay,
things.
that's really cool. But it turned out okay, right? Like it turned out sort of okay. You went through like your rough patches like everybody else. Everybody. Now you're fantastic. So you
Oh, I was fantastic then. No, I wasn't. There was some
you
times there
well
were
you
times that
were
I
for
was not
sure,
so
but and
fantastic.
I mean life is ups and downs, and you have to overcome difficulties. Doesn't matter who you are. But
And maybe that's why I'm so fascinated by extremism and like radicalization, because like I want to really understand what the like motivation is for somebody to become a, you know, anarcho Marxist communist that wants to fucking burn down buildings. And I also want to know what like the mental motivation is for somebody that would be like, I want to have a fascist dictatorship that, rounds up people of this nationality and sends them away, or, this sort of shit just like really fascinates me. So I'm reading
not
right now.
none
I'm
of
reading
none of
Mein
the
Kampf and Anarchy by Noam Chomsky.
oh man, so you're like really going into the extremes there, just
Yeah, yeah.
well, I mean, I think yeah, it's different
And
motivations, but like it's yeah, like some people are just radicals, and they're in a way it's easy to radicalize people because you're just like giving them simple solutions to things.
yeah,
uh like my way of like if someone like I like sort of in my head I entertain notions of being a politician of some sort, but just because I would like the world to be like I want it to be, like I think we should be basically a lot nicer to each other. I mean, it comes down to that. Like and I like I said, like I see myself as a citizen of the world, or like it's hard for me to be understand like all the why people like find like these differences between people like so relevant, when they are in fact not relevant even now, man. I mean, I hope I don't get the country wrong. I'll sound stupid, but I think it's in Ethiopia that they're killing each other now over like some like really minor differences, and just it's essentially like Rwanda. They're having like a Rwandan episode right now. I hope it's not as bad, but like I read, there's stuff like that all the time that happens. You know what happened in Rwanda, right? In the 90s, you had the Hutus and the Tutsis, which were like pretty much made up tribes by the Belgian colonizers.
yeah, and they fucking
Well,
genocided each other.
the Hutus decided to kill the Tutsis, just everybody, like insane, so like, but the thing is they weren't even real, like the Belgian colonizers had implanted this idea that there were Hutus and Tutsis in their minds. I mean, this is like documented. I mean, there was no real Hutus and Tutsis, like it was really just an invention.
Well,
And
there's no fucking like actual, not like I am. I'm not somebody. I don't like. I'm not like offended because I don't like get offended. But it like intellectually, I'm like I get very offended when people are like, these people are Nazis. It's like, no, they're not fucking Nazis. I know what Nazis are. I've studied Nazis very extensively.
yeah,
And
no, I mean, Nazis
a big
are,
portion of my family is dead because of Nazis.
yeah,
So like,
I'm sorry
because
about that.
somebody is like watching Jordan Peterson or voted for Trump, that doesn't make them a fucking Nazi. Find a new word and
Yeah,
call them that.
no, we
But
do we
it's
do use
not
it. We're
Nazism.
doing
But
we
it
do
makes
use
it
it so much.
simple because everyone will punch a Nazi. Everyone hates Nazis.
Yeah, no, Nazi. So, but we keep going to the same problem. So Nazis get really bad publicity now, and rightfully so, right? But I'm saying this like this sounds like we should know that this is still going on, right? Like Ethiopia, like we're still making the same mistake. It wasn't just the Nazis, unfortunately. It's like it's come back again and again and again, and I don't understand like why people keep insisting in making this mistake. I mean, this is a very stupid mistake. Like in Yugoslavia, people were killing each other just like the Nazis were killing the Jews. The Serbs are killing the Bosnians and the Croatians. I mean, it's not just the Nazis.
Here's the sad truth, but it's actually also a good truth. It's like half empty, half full. It's not like, why do people do this? The real question is, why should people stop? And that's what like the best kind of politician should answer.
Well, yeah,
because
that's exactly what I
we're
think
at
we should focus
3
on.
million years of tribal programming. It's absolutely biological that human beings want to be part of a group and fight an enemy and fear something different and like project all their shit. Even like with religion, like people think, oh, religion made people fanatical. No, people are fanatical. They created religion to control their crazy fanaticism. Now in Western culture, we've done away with organized religion, mostly, but people are still fanatical, but now they have to find a different thing to worship.
True. Yeah, and that's why basically I got into this like detour. What I was gonna say is that, my idea is to like convince people that we should like find a way to essentially stop doing that shit, and like get together and figure out that we're one world, with really one people. We just, of course, we can't just abolish all the borders, overnight, but there are better ways to go about it, so we can all live in a way that is reasonable, instead of like doing these things that are completely asinine. These are not like reasonable things, and we keep making like these same mistakes that are very stupid. I think this should be really the main instrument of politics, is to figure this very essential thing.
Well, you're not going to go far in politics.
Yeah, well,
trying
exactly.
to actually solve these problems.
That's
Bruno.
exactly
like
my
that's
point. That's exactly my point.
You need to exploit them.
Well, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly my point. That I'm a terrible candidate for convincing people of anything, or for like starting any sort of mass movement, because like these things are like the opposite of what actually starts mass movements and motivates people. What motivates people is exploiting those differences, and
well, maybe that's the key to your party. You're the anti-party party. You're the anti-ideology party. It's like the what was that fucking party in the no name? Was it the no name party? There was,
I don't know.
What the hell is that party?
But also, what the problem is that
the Know Nothing Party. That's what they called themselves, an American party called the Know Nothing Party.
But the problem is, I cannot have a conversation with anyone like without like going outside of these boxes. Like I have issues that I have positions that I would say are right wing. Other issues, I have positions that I would say is left wing. I certainly do not like conform to these boxes. So of the left wing ideology and the right wing ideology, like I'm like completely all over the place, because
you're fucking broken, dude.
I'm broken because I like to think about these
things. You need to pick one side, and whatever they choose, whatever they pressure you into thinking and believing, that's what you should parrot. Like, dude, you shouldn't be. If I had like, for yourself,
if I went on one of those debates,
take your soma.
If people ask me questions for half an hour, all the liberals would hate me and all the conservatives would hate me. So I would get I would get absolutely no support. But I think that's the problem of actually.
I think we're peas in a pod that way, Bruno, and you sense that, because I can, yeah.
But look, I prefer to think about whatever it is, my way, like I need to come up with my conclusions in a way that seems reasonable to me. I don't really like following formulas.
I had a professor at the U, Ofer Ashkenazi. I think he's back at Hebrew University in Jerusalem now. But he was teaching this class about the Palestinian Israeli conflict, and it was about like narratives was like sort of the theme, and what we explored, not just like the concrete history, but it was like events, and then like sort of the Palestinian narrative, the Israeli narrative, how they culminated in like media and modern society and that sort of thing. Culture is one of the best classes I've taken. And I was kind of talking to him once, and I said that same thing. I was like, man, I'm like, it's weird because when I have these conversations, because there's a bunch of different types of students there, and it's like I'd have a conversation with certain type of students, and they are like, after we talk, they're like, oh, dude, you're the fucking like left wing fucking peacenik liberal socialist, and it's like other people, and they're like, oh, you're fucking like right wing fucking Zionist fascist, It's like it. And he goes, well, if that's the case, then yeah, you're probably doing everything right. It's like that's where you need to be. Like the truth is always in the middle.
I think a lot. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times it is. At least from my perspective, I think. I think a lot of the times it is. Just extreme ideologies in general don't tend to be truthful, in my opinion. Like, and you really need to look at case by case, like a case by case scenario, because I mean, it's ridiculous. Like the current right versus left division in the United States is I mean, part of the problem is that there's been a process of like grouping a lot of issues that are not um, basically you come up with the answer for this thing, and then what's the next question, then you come up with this answer, and you essentially you come up with like 10 different answers to 10 different questions that are not necessarily related, but just because someone important in that camp had those answers and everybody else is following those answers, it becomes sort of like a dogma, even though like these are completely different issues, like you have to me, for example,
all right, let me interrupt.
Just to give an example, I mean, it's completely unrelated. The fact if you should have capitalism or socialism or a free market or a balanced economy, that's completely unrelated to how you should deal with racism in society, or like race relations, or like stuff like that. I mean, a lot of these questions are unrelated, and you should look at it like each case. You should try to figure out what the solution is, and a lot of the times the solution, I feel like neither of like extremisms is possibly going to give you the right result, because things are complicated. You need to take into account like different factors that yes, it's not easy to explain, but you do need to take into account like different aspects of it, and come up with a reason solution, right? It's not just this or that. I mean, that's a simplification. A lot of the times it's wrong.
Yeah. And there's like a certain kind of argument that's like, well, there's like violence all the time everywhere, like you're talking about Africa, and like the corners of our nation too that like don't get pressed but are always violent and hectic and traumatizing. Like, so if you pin all that on the system, which the system certainly has a hand in playing, you can make a sound argument that fucking just tear the whole fucking system down, because there's no point in negotiating with it and trying to make it. It's just like, this system is wrong. And like, that's a pretty like awesome. We have a thing to do. We got to tear the system down. Thinking ahead, like, okay, what system do we replace it with? Like, what are you against tearing the system down? Well, no, but I want to know what we're replacing the system with, like precisely, not just with like slogans. But they don't care, because they think we're the mob, we're going to decide. But they're not actually making decisions. They're just, running along with it. And the thing is, they're being told a good story. You can't talk to people logically. Like, it's one thing I learned reading Noam Chomsky and Hitler is that Hitler is a way better storyteller. Like, Noam Chomsky's right. He's always fucking right, except like when applicable to reality. But like it's like my fucking unicorn can go way faster than your Ferrari. It's like, here's the reasons why that's true. It's like, yes, but your unicorn doesn't exist. But
Yeah.
it, and only a certain type of people like want to get in, like are like us that want to know like, oh, what's the logical truth to it? Like, most people, you want to also be captivated, you know? And it's like,
Yeah, I mean
there's not.
Hitler was a storyteller, you know, and he touched on points a lot like other populist leaders, you know, today or in the past, you know. He One thing that I thought it was really interesting, I was watching a documentary about Hitler not so long ago. And one thing that because I am not able to appreciate German, you know, because I don't speak it, but um but you can see the pictures and how the crowd reacts and all that. And I do want to learn German because I actually studied in school. I was just a very bad student. I never really learned it, but one day I want to go back to it. But apparently, Hitler was a very good speaker, public speaker. In any case, there are many people that met Hitler and they said he was like a very boring person, like on one-on-one. He wasn't a particularly interesting guy, but he had like these narratives, like you say. He built stories, and he was like a performer. You know, like when
Yeah.
he was with his crowd, he was
And
performing an act, you know. So sorry, I'm taking too long. What I actually wanted to say, he the process, I never knew this, but
he
Hitler
took
actually,
Germany on the hero's journey.
yeah, and he listened to the crowd. So that's something that is not all public speakers do. But Hitler, that's why he was so good, because he listened to the crowd. Like, he would say something, he would listen to the crowd. Like, how do they respond to this? You know, and if they didn't seem excited, that was no good. You know, so like he needed to say something different. By
So
the
who's
end,
leading him?
you know, after a couple of years, you know, everything he was saying was like exciting the crowd, you know. And that's partially why he was so polarizing. That's partially why he was so extreme. It was also because of the crowd, because if you say something extreme, usually you get a bigger reaction, you know. So and you need to work it, you know, like you need to build your story, and he did that very well, you know. Mein Kampf, you know, a lot of the things that he says, you know, are complete, you know, very stupid things, but he builds like a story, you know. It's like G.R.R. Martin, you know, creating like a mythology, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Hitler's Hitler's mythology was like insane, because he actually believed in it in a sense. I don't know if he believed in it, but it was kind of like, it was insane because it was a mixture of reality and fiction, you know. G.R.R. Martin, he knows it's not true, but Hitler, you know, like the whole, yeah, like you know, like stuff like he said, you know, like there were like superhumans and subhumans, and that then he created this different races that weren't really there before he started talking about them, like the Slavic, like the Slavonic people, like he was going to invade Russia and transform this land and create like this Germanic utopia, and the Slavonic people are subhumans, they were going to be their slaves. I mean, if we didn't really had the crazy thing that was the rise of the Nazi Party, you know, you would read Mein Kampf and you would think it was like some demented person that wrote that. You know, it was a demented book. Unfortunately, actually, some of that stuff got sort of applied because you know, he was able to implement some of those crazy ideas in his speeches, and the Nazi Party became important. But if you had,
yeah. Germany was at a place that it was just like, yeah, we're
yeah,
gonna.
but I mean, it was a delusion, you know, it was a delusion. It was completely crazy. But he created his stories. And I mean, if you look at some of these crazy political movements, it's not very different.
No, I mean that's all it is like, yeah, what
Like the whole,
like hero's journey story are you fighting for?
I mean, the whole, a lot of communism, and communist revolutions, like the stories that they were telling were completely different from actual reality. It was a complete, it was fiction. It's like this mixture of fiction and fantasy that was so harmful in the 20th century. I hope we don't really get quite as much of that in the 21st century.
Are you kidding me?
No, we do, but hopefully it's not as,
I guess the like
as
Iraq war and stuff isn't going on.
yeah, but yeah, the whole invasion of Iraq, unfortunately, I mean, the whole weapons of mass destruction, not that it was the same thing, but that as well, I mean, it was a narrative and it wasn't really true.
So it's like really my philosophy is just not living a life where you don't rely on the government to like have to give you anything or take it away. Which is why I love America, because America is still like, we have this like sort of constitutional bubble, I think sometimes, and where like you can have, you can kind of be we hold the individual sovereignty like as a principle. So
It's a good system. It's a good system, and it has worked very well for the United States, certainly, and I mean, in general, liberal democracy has worked pretty well. I mean, I think right now we have like certainly problems, and it remains to be seen. I think the story of the 21st century is, it's still to be written. So, there are many challenges, but certainly, I mean, the framework, the American framework has worked tremendously well.
for like the irony of capitalism is that like all like the goodness it brings, it couldn't possibly be like as self-sufficient and sustainable without it. At the same time, allows for like outside, like free enterprise for outside interests to kind of like buy everything up too. So I don't know if I'm making sense right there.
Well, it's also a little bit late, so maybe we should we should start ending this. But no, I mean, that's yeah, something we need to discuss that some other time, like about capitalism and all that, because yeah, I mean, that's another very interesting question. And like, if that's a system that has needs to be remodeled, if because it certainly has many limitations, but what do we replace it with? I mean, there are many questions there. I mean, we can talk about it for a couple hours even.
Yeah, man. Well, it's been good talking to you tonight. I hope this has been fruitful. And
It was, man. It was certainly fruitful. It was a great conversation. I loved it. It was it was fun. Now, if anybody watches it, that's a completely different question, but I don't care. We had it was a good enough conversation that it was valuable in itself.
what you should do is go through your different podcasts and then like cut out clips of like the interesting stuff and then put them on YouTube as something like fucking watch this like cuck bitch get fucking served up by the red pill or something. It's like, some kind of crazy clickbait thing, and there's to get people into.
Yeah. Well, hey, you gotta teach me how to create like little clips. I don't know.
No, I'm really bad with computers. I'm more of the idea guy.
Yeah, me too, man. That's that's the problem. Okay.
We'll learn it one of these days.
Let me end this for our viewers at least. Thanks for watching. If you're crazy enough to watch this whole thing, please subscribe to the channel. And thank you.